Definitely a good day to work inside. Winter Wonderland has come to Oklahoma. Whew, let's get inside. I don't know about you guys, but this is typically what I come out to my shop and encounter. It's the previous days, or probably, and like in this case, about 2 or 3 days ago worth of work that's just been kind of left like that. And now I get to figure out where all this stuff goes. Luckily, it's not that hard, but yeah. So welcome back to Epic Cars, and as we continue to work on this 1969 Ford F100 four-wheel drive, basically I've torn into this deal based on the last video that steering was absolutely terrible, brakes were and it just, you know, overall ride and steering and, you know, kind of handling could have been improved. Steering was by far the worst issue. So in looking at the truck, what I've done is I've moved forward with replacing the steering stabilizer. I've also moved forward with getting a new steering box ordered. That was a whole ruckus in its own right because I ordered from another company. They sent me the wrong one. I had to send it back, get another one. I think I've done that 3 times actually. One of these things is not like the other. One of these things is not like the other. Remember, when you're doing an F100 at least, four-wheel drive, I don't know if this is true for F250s, the steering box goes on the outside of the frame rail, not the inside. Two-wheel drive trucks, they go on the inside of the frame rail. That's been the biggest issue so far, is people keep sending me the two-wheel drive box when I'm looking for the four-wheel drive box. So I've come in here and disconnected a lot of things. Disconnected the spring, the shock, the radius arm that goes from the axle back to this housing, and the front drive shaft. Two-wheel drive vehicle, a lot of times you can just take the spring, the upper spring hanger, and the shock off, and the actual whole axle will move back and forth. Well, you can't do that on a four-wheel drive vehicle because the drive shaft is attached. So when you're doing this on a four-wheel drive vehicle, you gotta remove the front drive shaft. Not a big deal. So I've got everything removed here, and I was able to get the radius arm out to now replace the bushings. Now, this is the third box of parts that I've actually ordered for the radius arm. Ordered this out of Moog, came from good old Stephenville, Texas. I'm partial to Stephenville, Texas, Tarleton State University. Didn't go there, but have family members that did and family that lived there. I also had a business there at one time. Great town. These are the radius arm bushings, or at least I hope they are, because I've ordered these. This is now my 3rd set, not from Moog, but from parts houses. And what do we got here? We got 4 bushings, we got 2 big washers, and we got some plates on the front. The bushings go basically right there, one on one side and one on the other side. There's a look at the actual radius arm on the ground. This is where the bushings go, and that's the part that actually goes around the front of the axle. And the other side of that clamp is right there. Now, inside that clamp that goes onto the axle, there's actually 2 pieces of rubber that go on the axle itself. So you can see this little piece of rubber kind of goes right there and just kind of gives a little bit of isolation from metal to metal contact. They go on both sides, so make sure that you've got these pieces of rubber. Now, these are all in good shape, so I'm going to go ahead and not replace those, but they do sell a kit. LMC sells a kit, and most parts houses have these rubber pieces that go in between those clamps. Again, here's just another look at everything, kind of just giving you where everything's at in this workspace. Steering box went right there. That's the shaft that comes down to the top. Screwed into the frame, pitman arm right there, screws onto the bottom, and that's what steers your tires. Steering stabilizer right back there, and again, just kind of the area where the spring goes, shock goes, and the radius arm goes back to there in the front drive shaft. I've ordered new springs that are 2-inch lift springs for the front of this truck. I also have ordered all new shocks all the way around. Now, one of the reasons why I did that is because you can see right here, and you can see this entire cab mount is just completely rusted out, so I've got to repair that. But there's a body lift that was put on this truck. You can kind of see it a little bit better over there. It's what, probably a 3 or 4 inch, probably 3-inch body lift. And that's what's allowing for the clearance of those bigger tires. I've actually got them on the back here already. And you can actually see inside underneath that bed, I've got those body lifts on, or body lift pucks on this truck also. So I was worried a little bit specifically about the front. I know the backs will clear once I take those off, not a big deal. But the fronts I was a little bit concerned about. So when I take this body lift off, I wanted to have enough clearance in this wheel well to where I wouldn't rub, which is basically what it was doing with the 35 1250 tires on it. I think I'll be okay because these wheels are quite a bit skinnier than the old wheels, but just wanted to, do it just to be safe, and heck, why not? Why not put some new springs and especially new shocks and make it ride really nice and tight. Now remember, we're doing this entire thing kind of got started because the steering was terrible. And when you move the tire up front, when I moved it back and forth, I was getting a whole bunch of play in the entire steering system, and it was mainly coming out of this steering box. So this is the actual steering box as it sat on the truck. So you're kind of looking at it from the side. Bolted to the frame right there. This part goes back to the shaft on the steering wheel. This goes down to the pitman arm and actually moves the tie rod in order to steer this entire system. Well, what I was finding out was whenever I was turning this, look how much I'm turning this shaft and look how little this is moving. In fact, if I hold it, it doesn't move hardly at all. Look how much wiggle I've got in that. I mean, I've probably got about, a good quarter turn on that steering input shaft before the pitman arm shaft actually starts moving at all. So on the top of the steering box, there's this kind of lock nut mechanism that screws onto that set screw, and then you've got the actual set screw itself. Well, you can tighten up your steering box by turning this clockwise or rotating it down into the actual steering box, and it actually does tighten up your steering box a little bit. The problem with this box is somebody had already done that to this vehicle and screwed this almost all the way down. So once I did that, it was just getting to the point where steering this vehicle that's as far as it goes down. Steering this vehicle is almost impossible. It's kind of an expensive upgrade, guys, but I think it's worth it to do, especially on this truck with the bigger wheels and tires and the fact that it's a manual steering box, not a power steering box. You got to have a really good box. So I went out and got a really good box. Not only did I order this new steering box, ordered some new Super Lift 2-inch suspension lift springs. And I've got the old springs sitting here, so this is the old front springs sitting right next to the new springs. And these are exactly 2 inches taller, and it looks to be just a little bit thicker as far as the coil is concerned too. Now anytime you get new springs or you're doing a suspension swap all the way around, good idea to change out your shocks. Now what I did is I had no idea what length of shocks I was going to need because I was not buying a lift kit all together where it was shocks and springs and they kind of do all those measurements for you. Secondly, with me raising the front of the truck, I had to get different shocks for the back and the front. So more of a stock type setup in the back and more of a lifted in the front. So in order to get that measurement, guys, you just take off your shock. This is at full extension. Just measure from end to end, and I had about, it was right at 20 inches full extension, and then fully compressed. And the reason I've got new shocks is because of this. See how I can just press that down? Here we go, here we go, here we go. It's going all the way down. Barely took any pressure whatsoever. And now, end to end is a little bit less than 14. So that tells me what my overall extended and compressed length of the shock should be. And I was able to order both the front shocks, the pair of shocks for the front, and the back shocks for the back, and then be different sizes to compensate for the different size of lift and duration that they're going to have to be working both extended and compressed. Now, as I showed you earlier, the other thing that I did was I changed out the steering stabilizer, and you can tell by all the grease and oil all over this shock absorber that one of the reasons why, because look at this. I can just basically, I mean, with very little effort whatsoever. So this was giving some dampening, but it sure wasn't giving enough to control those 35-inch tires. And that was part of my problem with the overall bump steer and what's going on with the tires in the front end. Okay, so I'm putting the radius arm back together, and I just wanted to show you this, that the bushings themselves, if I can get this off, bushings themselves have kind of a little shoulder on them. You can see that right there. And what happens is you need to put the front bushing like that, the back bushing like that, and it goes through this little shoulder, goes through this little, what I would call a carrier joint or a carrier bracket, and they basically sandwich together, and then they will seat on each side of that radius arm bolt to where they're not moving around. They're not loose when they're in there. All right, now if that ain't a pretty sight, I don't know what is. Been waiting on that steering box for about 2 weeks now. Got it from Redhead Steering, and it is an exact match, and I cannot wait to get it installed. What I've been doing, guys, in the meantime, really this project has just been one thing after the other as far as parts are concerned. Wrong parts sent to me. It's just been a mess. But I got the lift springs on, so I got the front springs on, got the radius arm bushings switched out on both sides, and now I'm ready to put the steering box in right there. So I'm going to put that in real quick, and other than that, the last thing I'm waiting on is shocks. The problem I'm having is the Gabriel, I can't remember the name or number of the shocks, but it's Gabriel. They don't make them anymore. So finding a shock to fit on this truck has been the biggest issue. I'm still waiting on shocks right now. Parts for this F100 4x4 are just tough. Two-wheel drive, you can find parts all day long. Four-wheel drive, it's just a tough situation. So I'm gonna get the steering box put in. All right, so I got her all buttoned down to the frame. One thing you wanna make sure, guys, is make sure that that slip joint is all the way on your box. And then secondly, before you put the pitman arm on right there, so this pitman arm will go onto that gear right there. Before you get to the point where you're gonna put the pitman arm on, go back to your cab and make sure that your steering wheel is kind of right side up. So you can see I've got the 3 spoke there, I've got the 1 spoke coming straight down, and mainly I'm looking at like the Ford logo. It's kind of high out there because it's on the lift, but I'm just making sure I've got the steering wheel straight before I actually put that steering yoke on the pitman arm. The other thing too is when you come around to the front, before you install that pitman arm onto the yoke itself, just make sure that your hubs are sitting straight, and that way it looks nice and you won't have a cockeyed steering wheel. So I've got the rest of the truck buttoned up. I've got the steering box on, so Redhead steering box on and aligned. Everything's good there. Got my springs in, got my radius arm bushings. The last thing, like I said, was I was waiting on shocks. Well, shocks never came in. I'm not going to mention the 2 companies I went to, but they're terrible. Don't over order from them, but how are you going to know if I don't tell you? So, well, in good karma, I'm just not gonna say it. So what I did is I went down to O'Reilly's and I took my measurements for what I needed, and sure enough, I needed a shock that was 2 inches longer than stock because I actually put a 2-inch lift on it. Makes sense. The main problem is the upper eyelet on the F100 for 69 is a very large eyelet. It's a big round one. That is the upper mount. As you can tell, it's a lot larger diameter eyelet than the lower mount. Well, in order to make this work, I had to just go and try to find the, as far as measurements, what would work in a different kind of shock that has both eyelets. The problem is I couldn't find one with the large eyelet that goes over that post at the top. So in order to do that, you have to adapt that existing shock into something that you can use, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so I went down and got a set of Monroe Gas Magnum shocks, and looks like the number is 34676 for anybody that's working on an F100 like me. They have exactly 2 inches longer as far as the compressed length and the extended length than the stock shocks on an F100. I'm sure that there's a custom shock out there, you know, such as like a Rancho or something like that that you might be able to use, but what I have to do now is adapt this shock in order to work with the larger eyelet, and you can see the details right there. The eyelet's actually just a little bit smaller than the stock one, but obviously the bushing, the urethane bushing that's inside there is just not going to work. Well, I've got to get that out somehow, and I'll show you how I came up with the way to do it. If you have a press in your shop, it would work a lot better just to press this bushing out and then go from there. The sleeve, it's kind of a little metal sleeve just like this one that's actually inside the shock itself. This is actually the exact diameter of the top post on an F100. This sleeve, if I was able to get it into this shock, would work perfect. but I don't have a press or anything like that, and banging on it's just not working. So what I came up with, and when I installed the driver's side, is just take a drill and a small drill bit and just drill around that sleeve. Okay, so just kind of go around the sleeve, go all the way through. Then it's real easy to get that bushing out, and it actually creates a little bit of extra space that I then use a step bit like this and actually drill down into the bushing itself and make it kind of waller it out a little bit to where it'll fit over that post and make it in the diameter of that. Okay, so you can see this bushing, I got it pushed out now. You can see the big difference in the size of that top post to a regular shock post. You can see it's quite a bit larger. So just get you a step drill bit just like so and get to work. All right, so now I've got that hole large enough. You can see right there. Again, it's about the size of that is what you're going for. And then we'll put it on the truck. Okay, so I've got the nut and the washer on the top post. Now I cut my strap, and you can see it's I just kind of use this radius arm to stop it from compressing down. This sleeve is a little wider than this cradle right there, that bracket that goes into. So I just use a grinder and grind down one side of this sleeve, and it fits in there pretty well. All right, here's a little bit of a sneak peek. She's looking pretty cool, guys. We'll get her out on the road tomorrow and see how she performs. Going about 40 miles an hour. I really like how this thing is driving. It's a lot more secure, a lot more safe. Yeah, so much better, guys. This thing, and it rides really good. I got a gas can with me just in case we run out of gas, but I'm gonna go ahead and go to the gas station now and put some fuel in this thing because I don't really know how much is in it. I feel safe enough to take it probably up to about 50, 55. Let's just see how that goes, but so far so good. Probably doing about 50 miles an hour right now. Something keeps popping over here and I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's my clutch pedal kind of coming back up. The spring on the accelerator pedal gets stuck, so I gotta make sure I adjust that spring. Man, there's no hands on the steering wheel, guys. I'm riding straight, completely straight. This is awesome. I can't believe how well this thing steers now and how well it rides. Brakes are still kind of eh. This is great. I cannot believe how well this thing steers. I mean, I could literally use this as a daily driver now. Okay, so here's the ultimate test. I've got a U-turn on this highway. I just got gas. Put about I put 14 gallons in it. So it was pretty low. It smells like gas in the cab now, so probably have a gas leak somewhere in the tank. Maybe why it was never filled up. But I'm fixing to do a U-turn here, so we're gonna ultimate test of the steering box. Man, so far so good. I love this thing. Rides so good, steers so nice. Engine works really well. All right, here we go. See, not a big deal. Complete U-turn. Track's nice. It's got good power. Real strong, healthy engine. Somebody suggested that the throwout bearing may be bad on this transmission, and that's what that clicking noise is, because it goes away every time it's under load. Because the engine sounds really good. I mean, it sounds good, and it's really strong. Guys, I'm doing 50 miles an hour down the road. I could probably go higher than that, but I'm just taking it easy for a while. Let everything kind of settle in. I love this thing. Tires need to be balanced. That's the only bad thing about putting really big tires on these small Ford rims. There's not any space to put the weights, so you have to go back and put beads in them. I didn't think it was going to be that bad, but I'm going 50, 55 miles an hour.
And it's not bad at all, but if you were, really going to take this on the highway and do 60, 70 miles an hour, you'd probably want to add the beads to it, which it's not that expensive to do that, so I just chose not to. This literally could be my daily driver. This is amazing. Really happy with it.
So I hope you like this episode of Epic Cars, where I'm kind of putting the lift on the front, getting the front end worked out, and the steering box. Guys, the steering box made a huge difference. So would definitely recommend Redhead steering box for all your steering needs in the future. Next episode I'm going to be working on this car is taking off the body lift, putting in some pans, floor pans that are rusted out, and working on the cab mount. Until next time, God bless. Take care.